In ancient scriptures, before the serpent in the garden, before the first lie whispered to humanity, there existed a being of incomparable light. His name meant, bearer of light, Lucifer, the morning star. He was not a monster nor a threatening shadow. He was pure radiance, absolute beauty, personified perfection. Among all the angels who served before the heavenly throne, none shone more intensely. Lucifer was created as a guardian cherub, positioned near God's very throne, crowned with wisdom and perfect beauty. His form blazed like the precious stones of Eden, sapphire, onyx, topaz, and gold. Some say that music flowed through his being, that his harmonies helped sustain creation itself. He was not just another angel in the heavenly choir. He was a leader among angels, inspiring others not through threats, but through his majestic presence. Where he walked, there was light. Where he spoke, there was clarity. For countless ages, he carried the weight of heavenly responsibility with incomparable grace. But perfection, however radiant, can be fragile. It doesn't shatter through war, it cracks through thought. A single thought. Why not me? Lucifer's fall did not begin with war cries or dramatic declarations against heaven. It began quietly, so quietly that no one noticed at first, not even himself. Lucifer became so impressed with his own beauty, intelligence, power, and position that he began to desire for himself the honor and glory that belonged to God alone. The thoughts came like whispers in the darkness, threading themselves between his duties, taking root where once there had been only obedience. Why should one being rule over all? Why should eternity revolve around a single will? Why shouldn't someone worthy, someone like him, occupy that position? At first, the thoughts didn't seem dangerous. They arrived gradually, transforming reasonable questions into ambition, ambition into pride, pride into the first flicker of disobedience. And because no angel had fallen before, no one knew what to look for. They saw a leader, a brother, a visionary. No one saw the slow unraveling. He still sang the heavenly songs, still remained close to the throne. But in his heart, the center of gravity had shifted. No longer content to serve greatness, he began to imagine becoming it. In Isaiah chapter 14, we see his 5 "I will" declarations. I will ascend to heaven. Above the stars of God I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. These weren't just words, they were the manifestation of a heart that had turned completely inward. The most dangerous thing wasn't his strength, but his influence. Lucifer didn't need to use brute force to lead a rebellion. His authority was natural, inviting. A third of the angels in heaven followed him in his rebellion, not out of fear, but because they believed in him. They saw in him a new kind of leader, someone who dared to question, someone who offered choice where before there had been only obedience. He moved through the heavenly ranks like wind through tall grass, subtle, constant, invisible until it was too late. He didn't force angels to join him. He inspired them. He knew their desires, their questions, their hidden yearnings for purpose beyond eternal obedience. He gave them something they didn't know they wanted, the idea of choice. Thus arose an army not from the shadows, but from within heaven itself. Tens, hundreds, perhaps a third of the host aligned themselves with him. Not in open rebellion, but in quiet agreement. They followed not out of fear, but because they believed. They saw in him something different, flawed, free, powerful not because he was appointed, but because he dared. The Bible describes what followed in brief poetic terms. There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon was Lucifer transformed by pride, twisted not in flesh, but in essence. The same being, but darker, sharper, no longer a guardian of light, but a force of disruption. Michael rose not with speeches or debates, but with silence and a sword. He didn't come to argue. He came to restore order. The battle that followed was not glorious nor clean. It was brutal, filled with grief. Heaven turned against itself, not because God had failed, but because Lucifer had failed. He had everything, power, praise, proximity. But he surrendered the one thing that made him truly holy, submission. And without that, he lost. No matter how bright the flame, no matter how deep the conviction, Lucifer's rebellion could not overcome truth. When it was over, it was final. Lucifer fell not because he was weak, but because pride always breaks before it bends. There had never been a fall before. No rebellion, no exile, no precedent for what it meant to be cast out of heaven. When the war ended, he did not fall in silence. He was expelled with force, cast down like lightning, not drifting but plummeting, torn from the heights where he once stood as one of the mightiest. But he did not fall alone. The host that followed him, those angels who had once stood in the courts of glory, were dragged down with him, a third of heaven. Not traitors by nature, but by belief. They had believed in him and now shared his punishment. What rose from the ashes was no longer the angel of light. His name changed from Lucifer, morning star, to Satan, adversary. That radiance, the beauty that once commanded reverence, was gone or, perhaps worse, corrupted. Some say he retained his beauty, that he still glows, still captivates, still speaks in harmonies. Because evil in its most effective form doesn't come dressed as horror. It comes dressed as desire, as wisdom, as charm. The most dangerous lies aren't ugly. They look like the truth you want to hear. The angels who fell with him followed the same path. They became the first demons, not born from shadow, but from undone light. According to the Book of Enoch, these fallen angels, known as the Watchers, retained memories of heaven, of structure, of what once was. And in those memories burned bitterness. His powers were altered, but not erased. He still had influence, still understood the workings of angelic thought, still held authority in his voice. But where once he inspired devotion, now he inspired doubt. Where once he led others in worship, now he lured them toward rebellion. No longer a light to follow, he became a shadow to fall into. He would not build, he would twist. He would not reign in heaven, so he would poison earth. And if he could not be God, then he would become the God of those who refuse him. His weapons were more subtle, more effective. Whispers, temptations, a perfectly timed question, a truth slightly altered, a desire carefully inflamed. The war was far from over. It had only changed shape. The Garden of Eden was untouched, radiant in its purity. It was a place unspoiled by pain or pride, where creation pulsed with divine harmony. Man and woman walked without shame, their souls untroubled by fear. There was no violence, betrayal, or concept of separation from the Creator. And it was here, in this stillness, that he struck. Not with thunder or flame, not with armies or violence. He came softly, silently, not as the monster many would later imagine, but as something cunning, familiar, disarming. Scripture describes a serpent more cunning than any other creature that moved through the garden. But whether serpent meant a literal snake or something more, some hybrid of beauty and intelligence cloaked in subtle power, the truth remains the same. He was persuasive. He did not force his way in. He was not unwelcome. He did not roar. He whispered. His weapon was not pain. It was suggestion, just a simple question, a seed of doubt. He knew that fracture begins not with rebellion, but with hesitation. And once hesitation takes root, desire follows. Eve listened and, in time, Adam followed. With that single act, the purity of Eden was undone. Not because of the fruit itself, but because of what it represented: mistrust. The moment trust was broken, the bond between Creator and creation began to unravel. The serpent had not simply convinced them to eat the forbidden apple. He had shifted their hearts. And in that shift came exile. This was not a victory measured in violence, but in silence, in the subtle cracking of something once whole. Lucifer could no longer return to heaven. That door was closed, but the story of his fall did not end in isolation. What he lost in position, he sought to reclaim in influence. Scripture came to describe him as the God of this world, not in title, but in reach. He was not omnipresent, but he didn't need to be. The systems he planted, greed, fear, vanity, control, did the work for him. Over generations, he established a framework of distortion where truth was malleable and worship could be bought. He adapted. He didn't offer destruction. He offered alternatives. He didn't deny the divine. He counterfeited it. He slithered into temples and crowned himself with different names. Sometimes as gods, sometimes as kings. Each culture gave him a new face, a new story. But the eyes behind those masks never change. His greatest weapon was not violence. It was redirection. He didn't just oppose God. He redefined the terms of obedience. And that, more than any fire or fury, became his kingdom. A slow rot, a hidden hand, a voice not in thunder, but in thought. The story of Lucifer has profoundly influenced Christian theology, being used to explain the origin of evil, the nature of sin, and the importance of free will. His account became more than a narrative, it became a warning, a standard by which all rebellion is measured. In all of Scripture, there is no rivalry more profound nor more misunderstood than that between Lucifer and Christ. One is the Word made flesh, the light that no darkness could overcome. The other, the light that turned inward, the brilliance that broke. They are not equals, neither in power nor in origin, but in story they stand opposite one another. One obeyed, one rebelled. One descended in humility, the other in pride. And across time, they met. It happened not in heaven nor in hell, but in the silence of the wilderness. Christ had just begun his earthly mission, baptized, chosen, and led by the Spirit into solitude. And it was there, after 40 days without food, that Satan came. He did not attack, he questioned. If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread. It wasn't hunger he preyed upon. It was identity. He offered food, then fame, then power. All the kingdoms of the world, all the glory, all without suffering. And Christ, unlike Adam, unlike Israel, unlike every soul before him, did not break. He answered not with defiance, but with Scripture. Not with anger, but with truth. This was Lucifer's second great failure. He had tempted angels. He had swayed mankind. But now, face to face with the incarnate Word, he could not penetrate the silence of obedience. But Satan wasn't finished. In the shadows of the Gospels, Satan entered into Judas Iscariot, not by force, but by invitation. Through bitterness, through pride, through quiet disappointment. It was not a wild possession. It was a whispered agreement. Judas betrayed Christ with a kiss, selling the Son of Man for silver. And in that act, Lucifer believed he had won, that the cross was a failure, that death had claimed the divine. But what he didn't see, what he never understood, was that the cross wasn't defeat. It was a door. 3 days passed and then something happened that no prince of darkness expected. According to ancient Christian tradition, Christ descended into the realm of the dead not as a victim, but as a conqueror. The gates broke, the chains were shattered, and the righteous souls, Adam, Eve, David, the prophets, were lifted up, led by Christ in triumph. Lucifer was humiliated not by force, but by mercy. Lucifer and Christ are never truly in conflict as equals, but they are in conflict as opposites. Lucifer sought to rise above God. Christ descended below all things. Lucifer wanted to reign without suffering. Christ suffered to reign. One grasped at divinity and fell. The other released divinity and rose. It was always leading to this point. For all his cunning, for all the ages spent shaping the course of human history from the shadows, Lucifer's story was never going to end in triumph. The Book of Revelation offers no ambiguity, no escape. His final chapter is not one of mystery, but of clarity, cold, uncompromising, and absolute. After millennia bound in the abyss, there comes a moment foretold and unavoidable when he is released. Not as a gesture of mercy, not as a second chance, but as a final test, one last moment to expose the hearts of men and prove once more what he truly is. He emerges not in disguise, not clothed in subtlety or charm. The age of masks is over. Now he stands unveiled. The deceiver returns to the world he once twisted. And immediately, instinctively, he does what he has always done. He gathers the scattered and the proud, the bitter and the blind, multitudes from every corner of the earth. But this is no final war. There is no true clash of good and evil. There is only the illusion of one. Before a single blow can be struck, before the army he has raised can lift their voices or blades, fire rains down from heaven. Not the fire of vengeance, but of finality. Lucifer is seized not in combat, but by decree. His authority, once boundless in influence, dissolves. The voice that once stirred rebellion across realms is silenced. The mind that once warped truth is emptied of power. And then comes the sentence, the lake of fire. Not a kingdom, not a realm to rule, but a place of final exile. It is not his domain. It is his cell. Here he does not reign over demons or tempt the lost. Here he is nothing, no longer feared, no longer followed. His punishment is not just pain. It is erasure, a complete and eternal separation from the divine light before which he once stood. For all the fear he inspired, for all the kingdoms he tainted and the souls he led astray, his end is not grand or noble. It is a caution, a grim reminder of what pride becomes when it runs its full course. Lucifer, once the morning star, ends not as a god, not as a legend, but as a warning etched into eternity. His story didn't end with his exile or even his judgment. It left a mark on theology, on myth, on the way we define evil itself. Whether seen as literal truth or powerful symbol, his fall became the ultimate warning. A tale of pride unrestrained, of ambition turned against its maker. Over time, his image evolved, a serpent in the garden, a dragon cast from the sky, a whisperer, a tempter, an adversary. Sometimes tragic, sometimes terrifying, but always the same message beneath it all. Even the brightest can fall. And that idea of light becoming shadow stayed with us. Lucifer became more than a character. He became the standard by which all rebellion is measured, a living symbol of defiance and of what unfolds when creation dares to rise against its creator. Not just a villain, not just a name, but a legacy etched in every story that dares to ask, what if?